It's official. The state does not protect its citizens. And if those citizens speak up, express concerns, follow their gut instinct, respond to credible information, or God forbid, go on a protest, they are labelled as extremists. Which takes me to the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, who has been forced to admit that he knew about the Southport triple murderers' links to terrorism before it went to trial. And more importantly, he knew about it when he labelled people out protesting the cold-blooded murder of 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift dance class as far right. Now, it's always been my view that Sir Keir Starmer is a shallow opportunist. He's done more U-turns than Lewis Hamilton. But this story demonstrates that he is an instinctively dishonest man. And this whole Southport story is a new low for his premiership, as it throws a light on his character and judgment. Now, Starmer is hiding behind the fact that he didn't want to prejudge any criminal trial by revealing terror links. No one is disputing that, but he didn't have to make a speech hours after the attacks, with relatives in Southport still grieving, to politicise the whole thing and to play games by condemning protesters with the far-right label. Given that everything is now far right, including, we're told, mathematics, merit, knitting, and even the countryside, I would suggest that term is losing its meaning. But Starmer was happy to go there during those protests. Yes, the breaking of the law is always wrong, but if only he felt so strongly during those so-called weekly peace marches in which Hamas terror supporters have wreaked havoc in our great cities, ignoring the rule of law, indulging in plenty of hate speech, and making Jewish people afraid to leave their own homes. Now, the Southport triple murders were a national tragedy and a moment of national mourning. But our Prime Minister, who is there to bring the nation together and address genuine concerns among the public, concerns which have been proved right, instead chose to divide the nation. In my view, Keir Starmer's goose is cooked, and no one will believe a word he says ever again. Not that many did. Two-tier Keir strikes again, with a two-tier approach to this vile crime, involving, before we forget, 3 innocent, beautiful little girls. Is Starmer going to apologise to those who he labelled far-right? Is he going to take those words back? I think those labelled an extremist, whose instincts that there was more to this story than met the eye have been proved right, should sue him. A class action lawsuit against the Prime Minister for libelling an entire chunk of the population. Wouldn't that be fun? Now, the wider implications of this terrible story are chilling. The Southport killer, who we can name as Alex Rudakubana, was referred not once, but 3 times to the anti-terror group Prevent, who seem to spend most of their time worrying about, you guessed it, the imaginary far right. And why did Sir Keir Starmer make that speech condemning his own people when he reportedly knew that this dangerous 17-year-old had downloaded and studied an Al-Qaeda training manual and even experimented with manufacturing the deadly poison ricin? Let's be clear, those writing after the vicious murder of these little girls, they represented, let me get that right, those out protesting the vicious murder of these little girls represented millions of us who could not understand how something so violent could happen in this supposedly civilized country. It struck us as impossible that it was just some regular kid who lost the plot. But the public were left in the dark in the immediate aftermath, a huge mistake on the part of the Home Office and the police, who seemed at the time to be more concerned about political correctness and controlling the narrative rather than being straight with the British public. Without jeopardising a possible court case, we deserved to know more than we were told, and certainly not to be told the opposite of the truth. A view shared by several top cops who joined me on my old TV show at the time, because it was the lack of information and treating us like children that made a grave situation far worse, and for real misinformation to blossom, which it did. Even now, with this monster pleading guilty, we still know so little about what happened in Southport and why. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has announced a public inquiry. Well, of course she has. That will be the bureaucratic fig leaf behind which this egregious government hides. A lengthy public inquiry will be the perfect shield for our lawyerly Prime Minister. Just look at the BS that we were told at the time. Before this murderous monster was named, we were repeatedly told that he was just a Welsh lad and born in Cardiff. As we now know, that didn't tell the whole story. His parents are both immigrants from war-torn Rwanda and may have borne the mental scars from the genocide in 1994. This is the kind of information that matters if you're going to prevent a future terror attack. Now, we may be talking about very damaged people. We may not, but it's important to get to the truth. If there had been more transparency from the start, public anger would not be a fraction of what it currently is. But the authorities, the police, the Home Office, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister took us for fools and asked us to ignore the evidence of our eyes and our ears. Proof of an authoritarian regime if ever you needed it. Now, I think there are parallels here between the Southport triple murder and the grooming gangs. A woke impulse to look the other way and to be more focused on community tensions and cultural sensitivities than the truth, than the rule of law, than the protection of our children. Those 3 little girls were let down by a failed system in which a twisted, hateful, un-British ideology was allowed to fester as a result of pathetic political correctness. Fair play to the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, who at the time of the Southport attacks did everything he could to keep the British public in the loop, in contrast to our Prime Minister. Of course, Farage got dog's abuse for doing so, but he's used to it. It was ever thus that the truth will get you cancelled. Well, let's hope that Sir Keir Starmer is cancelled in the weeks or months ahead for his wicked and misleading political games at a time of national tragedy. And as the excellent Matthew Goodwin mentions in his Substack article this week, there is a link between immigration, a lack of integration, and violence. That is a conversation we now need to have. And let me tell you, it isn't far right to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Now, to see the Mark Dolan Show completely ad-free, a longer version of the programme, plus extra bonus content and live videos, and your chance to message me, then head to my Substack at markdolan.com.